Hey, it's Drew. I'm excited that you're here to listen to another episode of Renegade Marketers Unite. And if this is your first time listening, then welcome. This show is brought to you by CMO Huddles, the only marketing community dedicated to inspiring B2B greatness and that has a logo featuring penguins. Wait, what? Yeah, well, a group of these curious, adaptable, and problem solving birds is called a huddle. And the B2B marketers and CMO huddles are all that and more, huddling together to heat up the coldest job in the C-suite. And now that CMO Huddles has 3 membership tiers, we're ready to inspire B2B greatness at all levels. To learn more, check out cmohuddles.com. Now, before we get to the episode, here's a shout out to the professionals at Share Your Genius. We started working with them over a year ago to make this show even better and have been blown away by their strategic and executional prowess. If you're thinking about starting a podcast or want to turbocharge your current show, be sure to talk to Rachel Downey at shareyourgenius.com and tell her Drew sent you. Okay, let's get on with today's episode. Hello, Renegade Marketers. Welcome to Renegade Marketers Unite, the top-rated podcast for B2B CMOs and other marketing-obsessed individuals. You're about to listen to a recording of CMO Huddles Studio, our live show featuring the CMOs of CMO Huddles, a community that's sharing, caring, and daring each other to greatness every day of the week. This time, we've got a conversation with huddlers Adriana Miner of Iterable, Andrew Bennett of Smartsheet, and Chris Willis of Acrolinx on the intersection between MarTech and AI and how these companies are adding and embedding AI into their products. Let's dive in. Welcome to CMO Huddle Studio. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, live from my home studio in New York City. Unless you've been hiding under an especially large rock, you've no doubt heard the buzz around AI and specifically about large learning models, LLM, like ChatGPT. In fact, if you haven't already been playing with those tools, get on it now. In the last 6 months, ChatGPT has been used by over 100 million people, making it one of the fastest growing businesses in history. For marketers, experimentation is the watchword as they navigate between the obvious productivity gains and potential risks like copyright infringement, getting dinged by Google, possibly factual errors, and sometimes often mediocre content. So no doubt the buzz around generative AI will continue. But what we haven't talked about on this show or in CMO Huddles is how software companies are baking AI into their products, which could end up being even bigger, particularly for marketers, than generative AI. We'll find out. And it's kind of an AI gold rush. And on today's shows, we have 3 companies who've announced AI integrations with great expectations. So with that, let's bring on Adriana Miner, CMO of Iterable. Hello.
Hi, Drew. How are you?
I'm
Well, good
doing
afternoon
great.
to you.
Where are you this fine day?
Well, this beautiful morning, I'm in sunny Seattle, enjoying a really freak summer weather right now. It's 80 degrees, so just
Wow, wow,
really,
wow,
really
wow.
excited.
So no liquid sunshine, which Seattle is famous for.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about what's been your most memorable introduction to AI thus far.
I got a good story for you. I'm the type of CMO that loves technology and like to discover it on my own. So I had the opportunity with all this chat GPT and all these new generative AI technologies that you can develop images and stuff to actually help my mother, who is amazing. By the way, she's a former CIO. She has a coaching company here in the US and it's geared towards the Hispanic audience. So I told her, I'm like, hey, let me help you out. And I just took a very time box experimentation on a Sunday. And in 3 hours, I went from absolutely nothing, and I used only AI tools to do this, to coming up with a name, creating a logo. I created a website, did all the copy through ChatGPT. I was shocked with the amount of things I could accomplish in just under 3 hours. Now, of course, it's MVP. It's not that great, but honestly, it was a great way for me to just get hands on. And it really shifted my mind of the potential and what could this mean? Of course, lots of questions, and definitely took that to my team. There's lots of great experiments that we're doing here in my team because I think everybody, just like we were in social media over a decade ago, that really changed the game. It is important for every marketer out there to just get that hands on experience and just try it out. I had that opportunity. It was really fun to share also on LinkedIn what I did. And I got so many questions like, what did you use? What tools? What was good? It's led to an interesting experimentation road for
Well, there's so many takeaways of that that I think are so important. One is you have to use the tools personally, and it helped that you had a specific assignment. Just playing with it, you don't get anywhere, but you needed to get a website up and running. MVP for anybody who's unfamiliar, minimum viable product. I think I'm looking at generative AI as the equivalent of when personal computers first came out and Lotus 1, 2, 3 came out. Suddenly, these tools are accessible in an unbelievable way. And it's now gotten to the point where it's like, not what can you do, but what can't you do with generative AI, which happens to be facts and basic things like that, like addition, not so good. And it's funny, I was at a conference yesterday on AI, and it was just mind boggling as folks were using it to generate ads.
I've seen full campaigns being driven on that, but again, lots of interesting thing of like how much does it augment versus replay? What can you do? You were bringing up before copyright. There's lots of questions there. Even as a really young person, you're right. I think whenever a new technology comes up, what is always true is to not fear it, but lean in and discover it and try to understand it. I remember I was like around 15, 16, and I was actually helping my father. I was his EA doing some proposals. And at the time, Harvard Graphics, for those of you that are as old as me, was like the new hot software to do graphic design. And I just took it upon myself to learn it just so that I could help my father create a logo and a subhead and everything for his RFP for his proposals for his company. And that was actually the first time I got paid for something was because I did a client logo in Venezuela in Harvard Graphic and they wanted like the floppy disk. So it goes to show many, many years later, I'm still the same person that was always interested in like how can technology help us do our jobs better. That's my introduction to AI. I guess the same as everything else.
Well, and I love it. And a key term, and this was the term that sort of was the headline at the conference. It's about augmentation. It's not
Mhm.
about replacement.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's get into how you at Iterable and how your company is starting to look at AI and how you're baking it in. Frame it for us. Is this evolutionary or a revolutionary upgrade?
I think it is both. And let me back up a second to just quickly introduce Iterable. We're a customer communication platform. And so what we do is help companies use channels like email, SMS, in app messaging, and everything to engage their customers and activate them in whatever action they need. That's what we do. And so if you think about essentially managing a life cycle of engagement with a customer, everything from like the first time they come in or they onboard and all of those messages, whether they're automatic, service oriented, or transaction messages, or email campaigns, or specific SMS campaigns, like maybe when they exit your relationship, there is a lot of opportunity there to bring in data, create content, as you're saying, then optimize and measure. And in that flow of what I would call connect with the data, design the experience, measure and optimize the experience, and then go back again, you have lots of opportunity for AI. So the portion we've actually had AI functionality for a while, and we know AI has been around for a long time. So there are some things where we look at in that life cycle, where can we augment what we are already doing? I'll give you an example. We have some tools around predictive goals, which is a customized model for any type of prediction you want to do. That to me is an augmentation of the things that we can do. But we also have things like frequency optimization or next best action. These are features that really take on maybe showing the marketer what they couldn't necessarily see in a very real time right away. It might take you months, it might take you collaboration with data science and all that stuff to actually get that. So that's revolutionary because it really changes the fact when you can see like what is the suggestion, what is the next thing I can do to engage which audience. That is very different in terms of like our whole process. So in those type of things, we say, hey, these are features that are going to revolutionize the way that you do work. So I think it's a balance of both. And that's where I leave it at. We announced the next generation of our platform at our conference recently, Activate, in lots of activity there at this point. When we look at the full flow of what we announce, we can claim that we are the most comprehensive amount of AI capabilities in the MarTech in our space.
There's so much hype around AI that it's really hard, I think, for prospects and customers to sort this out. And I think baking this in such that the customer doesn't really see it, it just feels like the right thing to do. Is that sort of what you're doing? It's like it's in a workflow that they're already using their product and it suddenly is just better.
Yeah, I would say both. In some cases, yes, and we don't charge for additional fees for many of the AI features that are just part of the flow, as you say. Versus, yes, there are some services that are add-on that are more visible. I think, like any marketer, it is important to ride the wave of the new things that are coming. And so AI is exciting. Like it's been around for a long time, but now we have an adoption. We have a moment in time where people are interested. And so I think it would be foolish for any company not to take advantage of that. Having said that, if you don't pay it off with real applicability and real features or real capabilities that actually are helpful and not just gimmicky, that's when it can be counterproductive. Many software companies are riding the wave of attention and interest in AI. So the way that we announced this was I didn't want to start with any thought leadership or any like marketing campaigns or anything on AI until we had something concrete to announce. So start product, we're a product company. So start with the product announcements and then build out from there the campaign around that. Marketers are smart. We smell BS like really
Exactly.
quick.
Exactly.
So that's my approach.
Got it. All right. I have lots more questions, but we're going to keep moving. Bring on Chris Willis, who is the CMO and Chief Pipeline Officer of Acrolinx and star of episode 30 of the predecessor to this show, Renegade Marketers Live. Hello, Chris. Wonderful to see you again.
Hi,
How
Drew.
are you and where are you?
I am sitting in my home office in Stowe, Massachusetts.
What was your first intro to AI?
I'm sure that the first was the way that Spotify built my playlists, which is fantastic. They know me really well, but probably joining this company from a business standpoint. Acrolinx has been AI since before AI was cool, because AI really became cool 3 weeks ago.
Right.
The company was born in an artificial intelligence lab in Germany and grew up in the AI and NLP space to the point where when I got here, I said, why don't we not say that in our marketing? Because it's not very differentiating. There's so many companies saying we're AI, we use AI. Well, what does that mean? Talk about the value that you deliver from the technology that you sell. Don't just tell me that you're AI.
What led up to your recent announcement and why was it important to get this new product, if you will, into the market?
I was obviously listening to what Audrey said, and some of that rings true to me as well. I think there's something happening, and we could make a bunch of noise. We could talk about how we've always been AI. We could build some thought leadership about the things that you should do. But what I wanted to do was deliver product. So the way that I described it internally is that usually you do this build up to an announcement. We're going to build product, we're going to announce, and then we're going to catch up with the marketing. And the reason was that our customers need what we have always done now more than ever. A big part of what we've delivered in the form of AI Enrich, which is the new feature set in our product, is leveraging the governance around content that we've always provided. It sounds great to develop content with a robot. You've already talked about all the intrinsic issues associated with that. And there are more. There's so many issues. There's a new term, AI poisoning, where the large language model is actually altered or trained on manipulated data for negative purposes. There's all kinds of things that can happen that come out in incorrect, improper, malicious results. So this need to identify and eliminate the risk associated with your use of language models has to be there. You can't start getting the value of this without wrapping it in enterprise grade governance. And that's what we've delivered, the ability to tune the model to your content and to do that without putting your content out into the world. We've seen companies that have put their content out into the world, private content, secret content, and been burned for it. So how do I not put this out into the public domain? How do I work within the walls of my building? How do I manage access to this? Because I might have a model that is tuned around my product information, and specifically product information that hasn't been released to the world yet. And then I've got an intern over here writing blog articles, pulling out of this model. Is that okay? It's not okay. You need to know what content you have, wrap it in governance, and then build models based from there.
Interesting. So Adri used the term ride the wave, but what we're really talking about is building a good board or a better board to ride the wave. In order for this to work as a marketer, as always, whatever this new promise is, you have to make it real with a product. You can't just say we have AI.
The size companies that we work with, the Fortune 1000 companies, have said, yeah, it's a no for us. We do not use ChatGPT at work. Okay, well, that's not real. We're all employed, and this is a thing that I want to do. So people are going to do it. We want to provide those businesses with a safe approach, a risk-free approach to the use of this new technology. There's value there. Let's help you get the value, but let's do it the right way.
I visited a large packaged goods company that happened to be based in the North Shore of Chicago. And it was around the time that the internet was coming out. And the company said employees can't access the internet because they were worried about them wasting the time. Now, can you imagine that notion? It feels absurd, right? To me, that statement that you just said feels equally absurd. You can't use these tools. This is as big as the internet, if not bigger. So what you're basically doing is guaranteeing that your employees are going to be a year or 2 years behind all their competitors because of your fear of that. What you're doing here is you're talking about there are risks associated with it. You're still in the content game. You still need to do this stuff. If you are going to wake up and let your employees start to use this as augmentation tools, you still need government. So you're jumping in. So how did this product sort of get to market, and what role did marketing play to help you get it there?
I definitely was part of the bell ringing process. We have a great R&D organization sitting over in Berlin, Germany. And one of the things as a company that we've given to the team is the ability to spend 20% of your time on a passion project. And we found some people that had a passion, and we got the initial build of this outside of our regular product cycle. And that was what let us move really quickly. So several really smart product people and engineers putting everything into this package of functionality and then turning it into the thing that we deliver. So stage one was get me to demo something working. Stage two is to build that whole thing out and start making it work. And now we're accepting applications into the beta program as we speak. We get new applications every day. It's exciting to see the companies coming in wanting to experience this. And the interesting thing about it is the first step of that is implementing part of our product that does that governance, our collection tool that allows you to identify the content that you want to train with, and then training on that content so that you can have one or many versions of a model based on what you're creating, who you're creating it for, what the content is you want to pull for. And then you're using that content not just to build models and write, but to pull back responses and automatically improve existing content. So I can make the content that I have today better through the content that we've already built.
With the companies that are current customers, I'm imagining, who are wanting to use the beta, is this going to be an upgrade, just an enhancement, a new feature set that they have to pay more for? Or
Early days.
okay, but I'm imagining that the key target initially is existing customers.
It's definitely one channel, but we're seeing it from all directions right now.
Can you get new customers because they see the governance problem already because they're using it? So this is the interesting part. If you're not using this, if you're not using generative AI, you don't know the problem that you're describing, right?
I would argue yes. Trying to get somebody to understand the purpose of enterprise content governance is like marketing medicine. I need to explain to you that you're sick, and then I need to show you that there is a cure to being sick. Generative AI made it clear to you that there is an issue, and that you need to address that. It came out. This is fantastic. I want to play with this. Tell me how to write a document. Go write this document for me. And then the email came from IT and it said, by the way, do not use the company name. Do not use it on a company computer. Do not share any company information and do not create company content with it. How do I use it then? I need a governance model. I need some way to govern this content and to create a risk-free environment. I got to go talk to those guys. They've been talking about governance for 5 years. Oh, this makes sense now.
This is so interesting. This conference that I was at yesterday, we all felt like we were at the beginning of something really important. And I think what's so interesting about what you just said is AI is going to create a lot of great things, but it's also going to create a lot of problems and a lot of opportunities. And so as a marketer, to think about, particularly if you're in the software world, you need to be thinking about how is AI going to impact our business and how do we use it to make our product better or address new problems. And then I'm just going to throw out a complete counterpoint that I think is going to make a difference. People are going to start to say human made next to their comment, their copy, versus it's no filter on Instagram, but hashtag human made is going to be a thing. Just saying, just for the record, I wanted to be on air having said hashtag human made. Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, now we're going to move on to Andrew Bennett, CMO of Smartsheet. Hello, Andrew.
Hey,
How are
Drew, how you
you?
doing?
I'm doing great. So where are you?
I, like Adri, am enjoying an unseasonably warm May in Seattle. It's been beautiful, although I am mourning the recent playoff loss of the Kraken a couple of days ago, but it was a great run.
Well, we've had similar issues here in New York, so we can be empathetic to that. So do you have a sort of first or memorable introduction into AI in your world?
I certainly do from a Gen AI standpoint. We also have used AI in our product for years in a variety of ways, but I would say my aha moment with generative AI came, I think, like a lot of people, in the few weeks after Chat GPT launched. I had done sort of the standard playing around with the tool. I think my first prompt was something like, write a poem to the Smartsheet leadership team in the voice of Shakespeare, wishing them a good weekend. It was interesting. A few days later, my head of demand gen sent me some output where he had gone many steps further. And the prompt was something like, create a 4 email outreach sequence explaining the benefits of moving to the Smartsheet Advanced plan, incorporating the value points on the following webpage. And I was blown away. Again, it wasn't perfect, but not only was the content dead on, but it was formatted like an email, merge fields inserted in the right places. That was certainly the eye opener for me around the specific impact that Gen AI is going to have.
Just the formatting ability, which is, again, that's the next part of discovery when you get into these tools, is that you can tell it, format this like an email that's going to go out with that.
Yeah.
Not just write an email, but format it so that I can drop this, and you can tell it the system that you want to drop it into, and it will organize it. So talk about your Smartsheet and where AI was.
So Smartsheet is the platform for work management. All kinds of businesses use us for a ton of different uses, from Roche managing COVID testing capacity early in the pandemic, to the McLaren Formula One team using us to manage digital assets over a race weekend, all the way down to really simple SMB use cases like plumbers who manage their schedules in Smartsheet, right? Huge range of use cases. And we've always really thought about using AI in a way that augments the work that people are doing, as opposed to asking them to fundamentally change the way they work to use this new set of tools. And so some of our usage of AI over the years hasn't even been noticeable, but it's things like, when you go to your home tab in Smartsheet, you see a list of work that we think you might want to work on. And that's all been driven by an AI model, right? So you're looking at different dashboards and reports based on an AI model, and it just works. Another example, if I think of the McLaren use, so they, over the course of a race weekend, are really, really active on social media. They come away from a weekend with literally terabytes of video and imagery, and they manage that all in our digital asset management platform. They have a ton of sponsors, and there are, I think, 48 logos on that race car. And it's very common that a sponsor says, hey, I want to see imagery from the past weekend that shows my logo. You can't do that in a workable way with humans. We have an AI model that recognizes logos in imagery, and in a fully automated way allows them to say, show me all the instances of dark trace from the race last weekend. Right. So we've really tried to be thoughtful about incorporating AI in a way that sort of fits into existing workflows. And so now with the new large language models and Gen AI, there are a bunch of new possibilities. Yeah, maybe there's a chat assistant inside Smartsheet, but again, we're trying to be more thoughtful about how are people actually doing their work and how do we use AI to do things like connect a new user with a template and some sample data that's more relevant to the problem that they're trying to solve. Or there are ways that these new models can much more intelligently tag imagery, right? I gave the example of specific logos, but being able to, in a fully automated way, generate text descriptions of a wide range of content. One challenge in a lot of tools today that allow for more complex uses is there are formulas involved, right? So in Smartsheet, you can do a lot of work just configuring things. For some of the more complex uses, you're using formulas, and it turns out these large language models are really good at helping with formulas. I don't know if you've ever asked for help with an Excel formula. Even the relatively untrained default chat GPT model is really good at that stuff. So things like giving people help with a formula, those kinds of use cases are what we're really focused on.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about it because it's funny. I was doing something on Canva and I didn't know how Canva described a particular brochure thing. And so I went on to ChatGPT and said, what does Canva do for a single folded thing? And the answer was, of course, bifold. Boom,
Right.
done. And that was 2 seconds. Whereas if I had tried to go to whatever their helpline, I couldn't find it because if you
Yeah.
don't know the vocabulary, you just can't do it. And I'm imagining there's going to be this interesting thing where people who know ChatGPT may be going to ChatGPT and just already saying, hey, I need this formula to use in Smartsheet. So suddenly I'm now also thinking, well, what if they have that wrong? And so part of this thing, and Chris sort of brought up the AI poisoning, is you need to do the opposite. I feel like marketers now need to be thinking about how do you make sure the right formulas are in there?
Just like the risks of AI written content, right? I think we all know today that no, you can't just have the AI write blog posts for you and all of a sudden you're going to rank for the terms that you're asking it to write about. It's got to be curated, it's got to be unique, it's got to be human checked for errors. And absolutely the same is true of formulas in a work management platform or templates that you're serving up with sample data.
There's gonna be this moment, but suddenly I really think that anybody's using a ChatGPT is everybody's help desk. The notion that you could have their API sitting on top of yours as a different way of providing customer service kind of makes sense.
It does, but how can we meet people where they are and actually provide unique value?
Right.
You can go to ChatGPT today, ask it questions about Smartsheet, and it does a damn good job. So us just surfacing that same window inside the app, yeah, whatever. You got AI now, but it's not actually that helpful relative to what's already out there. We have things like a really active online community of Smartsheet users who are helping each other out. And there's an incredible rich amount of data there that these LLM models do a really good job pulling out the nuggets. So we're thinking about things like for more specific, maybe somewhat more structured content like a community site. How do we do a better job surfacing that in the app in a way that you're not going to get when you just go to ChatGPT?
I think I shared with everyone in the CMO Huddles community, we created this virtual B2B CMO. We
Mhm.
took all this data from the conversations of CMO Huddles over the last 2 years and uploaded that, and it sits above ChatGPT. But the likelihood is the answer that you're going to get is going to be informed by it. So, similarly, there's going to be all sorts of integrations. I did want to make sure because I may have missed it, but what is the latest in terms of how people can use AI in your tool?
The latest is some stuff that's announced and some stuff that isn't announced yet.
Okay.
So some further refinements to the AI models that have been in place, like a lot of the image recognition work,
Okay.
a lot of the engines for suggesting content that is relevant to you inside Smartsheet, and then a lot of work in process on things like a better way to get help with Smartsheet, better ways to get help with formulas. And we think of this as sort of inherent in the product. So we do not anticipate an AI module, right? There are already different modules in Smartsheet. You can manage your work, you can manage your people, you can manage your assets. Each of those have some AI today and will have more AI in the future. We also have more advanced tiers for things like bigger enterprises that are focused on security and compliance and control. And so there may be some AI functionality that exists only in those higher tiers, but it is definitely not a separate set of SKUs.
Well, and it makes sense because all it is the same promise, only better. So you're not creating something that is different at the moment. It's fluoride. And it's sooner,
Yeah,
frankly, it's going to be fluoride.
our platform has always been about enabling people to be a lot more productive. Some ways are really simple. Some of them do have to do with things like workflow and automation. And so you're allowing people not to be replaced by the robots, but to accomplish so much more because you're making them that much more productive. And so you can build an automation rule, and now you have AI that just makes all that work so much more scalable and so much more productive.
Augmentation. Okay. So it's time for me to talk about CMO Huddles. Launched in 2020, CMO Huddles is an exclusive community of over 100 highly effective B2B CMOs who share, care, and dare each other to greatness. One CMO described Huddles as a cross between an executive workshop and a therapy session. And given how hard things are getting out there, who doesn't need a little reassurance that they're not alone? Everything about CMO Huddles is designed to be a force multiplier, helping you to make faster, better, and more informed decisions. Since no CMO can outwork this crazy job, CMO Huddles is here to help you outsmart it. So, Chris, Adriana, Andrew, Chris, let's start with you because you're a veteran huddler. And I'm just curious from you if there is a moment, whether you can recall whether it was a recap that inspired some action that helped you move your business forward.
I think one of the nice things is that Huddles goes beyond the actual meetings. And I was setting out a year and a half ago to start building a new category for our technology. And I was able to form a breakout group out of the Huddles, take it offline into the real world, and work together to get best practices from a bunch of different CMOs that I would otherwise not know. That's a huge value. Having that network that you've created is really important to the way that I go about business. I don't know if you see me in Slack, but I'm in a lot of contact with the people that are in the group on a regular basis.
And you are definitely on that giving and getting value spectrum. And Audrey and Andrew, you're both relatively new to Huddles. So I'm just wondering if you've had an aha moment thus far where Huddles is able to bring some value or insight to your world.
I am brand spanking new. This is actually my first CMO Huddles event. And so I would say already have gotten some great insights from Adri and from Chris, and also to the point of the value in establishing really strong peer relationships. Adri and I are both in Seattle, and we've already agreed that we're going to get together. So there you go.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay. And Andrew, anything to add?
I'm glad that you mentioned the ChatGPT upload. I didn't realize that, but I haven't been able to come to any of the meetings. So this is also my first one, but I have used the recap section, and one specifically that we looked at my team. You had some recaps around customer marketing that had some like tips on like questions to interview customers for testimonials. So that was a resource we use. I shared it with my team. Now I'm like, oh, because that took me a little while. So I think it's great, the recaps, because our schedules are crazy. So it's good to have the documentation. So now I'm going to try your ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT about CMO Huddles recaps.
Awesome. At any point in time, if you come up with an issue like that, chances are we've covered it in the last 3 years and we have a whole archive of, and we're more than happy to pull those out. So if you're a B2B CMO who can share, care, and dare with the best of them, come on down, check out cmohuddles.com and tell them Drew sent you. All right. So the AI noise is like deafening. It's just everywhere. It's every headline. It's everything. And the hype cycle is beyond even what we faced with .com companies. So how are you hoping to cut through with all this noise? And how do you make sure that people actually find out that this beta opportunity exists?
Sure. You differentiate your message for starters. We're different. So we're talking a governance message that I think most vendors aren't talking about. Everybody's got a way to use and to benefit from the generative aspect. We have that. We're doubling down on creating safe use. And we're doing that through our messaging, through PR. We've actually been on TV recently. We're having a lot of luck getting this news out because this is an important aspect of what the enterprise is looking to do. It's
Right.
multiple channels of outreach to get this news out to the audience.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the 60 Minutes Leslie Stahl report on generative AI at the beginning, and it was mainly about the fear. It was like, oh my God, this is terrible. We got to regulate this tomorrow. And with every new opportunity, there's always the fear of that opportunity. So I get it that you focusing on how do you manage the risk makes a lot of sense. So, Andrea, how are you approaching the story that you're telling around AI?
By the way, Chris, I thought that was really smart. I think it's really great to be talking about governance because that is like what we need, right? We are taking the opposite. We are going, I would say, from the ground up. So our approach has been to focus on customers first, like I said, and like product features first, get some documentation on success. For example, we, again, at Activate, we showcase care.com and Redfin, which are some of our, what we call our design partner customers that have been in the early alphas and testing of that, and really building a community motion around the applicability of AI, going that kind of like word of mouth and activating it that way. Because like I said, like by the time that we really want to put sort of like, I would say the high level campaign and high level more marketing, I want to come with already a troop of documented success, best practices, and really activating that peer-to-peer learning. So that's our approach of how we're trying to cut through the noise.
So we've got sort of one is play up into the manage the fears. Two is make it real and make sure that you have real cases and real things before you do it. And Andrew, how are you making sure that you're cutting through?
Yeah, I think to build on that last point, really making sure, first of all, that we're informing our product plans and that what we're shipping is actually meeting customers where they are and enhancing the ways that they're working, as opposed to asking them to work in a different way. And then, just like we always try to do when we're marketing well, understand your customers and understand value and tell relevant customer stories. Hopefully, when I give my McLaren example of how of managing assets, yes, I can say we have an AI model that identifies things in imagery. But when I tell the story of coming back from a race weekend with terabytes worth of data and having a sponsor ask you for pictures of their logo on the car, hopefully that message lands. And so when we think more about meet customers where they are, show real value, and then do a great job telling customer stories.
Is there anything that you're doing in terms of differently? Chris, you mentioned press. I imagine there's a moment where the press is going, great, another AI story. But for the moment, it's a feeding frenzy. So is press more important at this moment?
I think that there's a lot of conversation happening. The day that we appeared on the news was the day that the president met with the AI folks to talk about regulation. And that is a huge news story. So the ability to jump onto that story, be additive to that with a governance message is a really interesting opportunity for a company like us. So I think that getting into that news stream, differentiating yourself and being a go-to resource has been a really valuable approach for us.
How about you, Edri or Andrew? Is there something new in your marketing mix as you're going through, or something that you're emphasizing more that you would have not been able to do if we weren't in the
Yeah.
AI hype cycle?
I think this goes actually with Chris. It's just the other side of the coin is like when there's something new, like people are looking around and there is a lot of interest. So, what are the things that people turn as to their trusted sources? And those are going to be word of mouth and their peers, which is why I said we're really emphasizing that community or peer to peer word of mouth motion. Or you see it in the news and sort of interest, which I think that's great. Andrew's approach, I believe, is the right one. But to me, is that like it is an opportunity to really go where people are going. And so think of what do? We read news to get informed, or we talk to our friends. How are you doing? What does this mean? We're learning from each other. I mean, just this conversation, I'm sure I took a ton of notes about things to think about and do with AI in my own like marketing team, not as a provider, but as a practitioner. That's why the other side of the coin, I would still call it kind of like PR and communications overall, but our focus is on the word of mouth, peer-to-peer learning.
Got it. And again, that's complete with your sort of community up. Let's get people using it, embracing it. Let's get the cases. Let's make sure that what we're talking about is not smoke. You're all marketers to marketers here because they're part of this moment too. Right. I mean, they're also thinking about, well, how are we using AI And I feel like this moment in time for companies like yourself who are marketing to marketers, there's got to be a huge expectation that you're also going to be integrating these tools and you're going to be making them easier and more intuitive and faster and better. There's pressure, I imagine, to do this, to get news out.
PR works when you have some unique perspective that's really well aligned with what's kind of happening already in the news cycle. And so you take Acrolinx, they've got a really great, unique perspective around things like compliance. And that lands really well when there are conversations happening actively about how do we make sure that AI doesn't get totally out of control. For me, I think about when do we have some unique perspective that's well aligned with some narrative that's out there. And for now, we're really focused on building the right value points for our customers, and then we'll pounce when we see the right window.
And it all makes sense. I mean, Smartsheet has a huge installed base. Economy is kind of tough. If you can bring these to market for your existing customers and they feel good about you, then they're more likely to stay or use you more
Yeah.
or expand. So all of that makes sense in terms of the strategy that you two are taking. I'm curious now in terms of how are you and your teams looking at these tools? How far have you gone? Anybody thinking about creating ads using these tools at this point?
Yes, we're looking at creating ads. We're looking at using these tools not as sole content creators, but as a way to help us create content in a more efficient way, both with written word and with imagery. A whole nother realm of that's really important inside marketing, which is not about Gen AI, but AI more broadly, is the impact that all the AI models are having on how we advertise and how we target. And had a really deep conversation with our Google team yesterday about massive changes to how we're going to run our campaigns based on some of the newer AI technology. So that's very front of mind also.
Were you any of you facing any kind of resistance from your writers in particular? Because I know this came up yesterday at the conferences. Some writers are resisting the tools, and I'm just curious if that's been anything that you've seen so far.
I have not.
Okay.
Our our content organization is relatively small with high requirements for derivative content from big pieces. And that's how they've begun to use generative AI, is to take those masterpieces, the premium content, and build those derivatives, whether that's email cadences or mini books or landing pages, where we've already done the work. Now we just need a bunch of things. So it minimizes additional editorial because we've already created and gone through editorial. We're just quickly pumping out the things that need to accompany this bigger piece of content so that we can do more bigger pieces of content.
Yeah, I agree. And I always say one thing that we're doing in my team too, and we have done email and actually we use it too for Excel formulas and generating some code, like a lot of our marketers may not have that like ability right away, but it is to showcase it after that whole like Sunday tech test that I did. We talked about, hey, let's take this month and everybody in the team is going to take one task with ChatGPT this month and just try it out, do something, and then let's have a sharing. So you can also make it fun if there are any resistance. I haven't found anything in my team, but definitely the way that we're talking about it is like, it's sort of regardless of this job, it's really good for your career and career development. So let's make it a team professional development effort. Let's go and experiment and try out things and then come and share with one another, because then the learning about those tools is augmented, but not just on the individual, but as a team, we become way more proficient and we find more and more applications about it. And also we're finding a lot of limitations, to be honest, like to your point about like things about uniqueness. And we've done some experiment with SEO. And again, it has some limitations because also how the Google algorithm is picking up what's get generated by AI or not. So I think like what I've seen is it's not about one or two cases, it's about really empowering and opening the door and inviting the whole team to let's learn on this together and figure out it together, because it is very early, like especially with generative AI, it is early. And that's important to keep in mind. As robust as it feels, it is also very early. So we're yet to discover how it's really going to be applied. How do we govern it? How do we secure it? My biggest concern, frankly, is how do we manage in this experimentation phase? Like, it's very unclear how all these between copyrights and security is going to be manage, particularly with ChatGPT.
I've been wondering about, because we had a bonus huddle first with Noah Breyer and then with Nicole Leffer. And what you realize when Nicole was in here, was really hands-on, is that the group that was listening that were taking notes furiously because none of them had gotten to the point where they knew even how to write the prompt that would get there. And this is the part that I'm really wondering about, is whether or not every marketer is going to need to have a dedicated AI person who just knows the latest on prompts and how to do it. It's going to be hard to keep up.
I feel like there are going to be some more technical uses where you're probably going to need to have specialists. I think it's going to be like, are you able to use a computer? We had some pushback from our writers really early, like maybe January-ish. But today it's so clear that it's like the equivalent of, should I use this new thing called a word processor? The answer is yes, of course. Your day is going to look different than it did when you were using a typewriter, but there's no choice but to embrace it.
Drew, you mentioned like building a better board. That's a quotable right there. And look, with other technologies, we have the concept of COEs or Center of Excellence. That I'm with Andrew. Like the whole power here is that it's democratizing and it's like a tool that everybody can use and it has a ton of applicability. So I think it would be a mistake to try to centralize the prompts and stuff. But on the other side, could organizations have some kind of like center of excellence where you have some training, some best practices that are specific to that company and to those departments and functions? Yeah, absolutely. Wouldn't it be great to have that sort of in-house support? Yeah, why not try that?
Training. Just keep in mind, you're going to have to do it every 3 months, whereas we used to do it once a year or twice a year. Hey, new tool, learn it, done. I always ask, what would Ben Franklin say? And I have a quick story on this. So it's 1780s. Franklin is in Paris, and the first hot air balloon actually flies over the city. And Franklin's looking up in wonder. He's at this point an old man, and he hears somebody say, "God, this is so stupid. I mean, what good is this?" And Franklin's instantaneous response was, "What good is a baby?" And I love that, because this is a baby and this is something that is going to grow up into something phenomenal, whether you're baking it into your products or how you're going to use it. So with that, let's get to some final words of wisdom. If a company is thinking about adding AI enhancements to their product or service, what's the number one lesson you've learned related to this exercise? And let's start with Chris.
Reduce your risk, manage the risk, include governance in your process.
All right, there he is. He gets his sales message in to the end. All right, Andrew.
You use these technologies to enhance the way people work. Don't ask them to fundamentally change the way they work.
It's just so much easier, right? You're already doing this. It's just going to be better. Okay. Yeah. And Adri.
Don't do it alone. Lean on others, learn from others, share what you learn.
So when you're talking about it in terms of baking your product, is this making sure that you're part of a community that's also doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like marketing and brands and every profession is one of the most important things that when you're a marketer and you're trying to do things is like you're in a team and you have to learn to cross collaborate and really bring it together. So as a product, like when you're trying to design your experiences and trying to do it, this is not about you as an individual alone. You don't have to do it alone. You can work with others and AI can help you better work with others.
There it is. You don't have to do it alone. All right. The big word here is augmentation. Make what you're doing better. I think that's really the insight of the whole show. But thank you, Adriana, Chris, Andrew, you're great sports. To hear more conversations like this one and submit your own questions while we're live, join us on the next CMO Huddle Studio. We stream to my LinkedIn profile, that's Drew Neiser, every other week. Renegade Marketers Unite is written and directed by Drew Neiser. Hey, that's me. The show is produced by Melissa Caffrey, Laura Parkin, and our B2B podcast partner, Share Your Genius. The music is by the amazing Burns Twins, and the intro voiceover is Linda Cornelius. To find the transcripts of all episodes, suggest future guests, or learn more about B2B branding, CMO huddles, or my CMO coaching service, check out renegade.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep those Renegade thinking caps on and strong.